The money stage, we're ready with an exclusive fire chat with Ahmed Alfi. You steal my chair. Yeah. It's fine. Stay. Yeah, it's fine. Okay, just a quick intro. Thanks. Just a quick intro. Ahmed is the founder and chairman of the Greek campus in Cairo. I had the pleasure to speak. Actually, my sales talk the one I give this morning is exactly the same talk I give to the Greek campus in Cairo a couple of years ago. And he's also the chairman of Sawari Ventures. I understand it's a MENA oriented fund. Okay. What is the stage you guys invest in?
So actually we also have Flat 6 Labs, which is the accelerator. So we invest from idea, pre-company formation, help form the company, all the way through Series A, B. We don't do C.
Okay. Now, I mean, I've been in the MENA region for some time, and I'm based in Asia, and I see certain similarities. I mean, there are different, obviously, there are discrepancies between the two regions, but across the two regions, I see one thing. If we're looking about how the region is transforming, is that I see big businesses, the telecom, the retail, the conglomerates, okay, start looking into technology, start to finally look in people like us, right? A couple of years ago, that did not exist. You are the tech guys, yeah, you let us know maybe one day, right? Now, the big conglomerates all over the world, they are kind of threatened by the tech companies, right? So what's your view? What's happening here in the MENA region in these regards?
So the MENA region, because of its dysfunctionality, ends up being very protectionist for big companies. Once you break through the bureaucratic borders, you actually have this insulation against foreign competition and against startups. But the startups are starting to come on. Most of the startups made the decision that it's easier to collaborate with the big companies than to try and attack them. Although too many startups have died waiting for the contract from the big company that they base their game plan on. So I don't recommend that as a strategy to anybody. I'm a big fan of kind of one of the slides that you showed with the little fish eating the big fish. One of my friends calls it the ankle biter economy, where the little guys can bite the ankles of the big guys and bring them down. My recommendation always to the startups is try and avoid betting your future on one big contract from somebody or having the blessing of a big corporate. The big corporates are realizing that we're going to disrupt their businesses, and they're trying to embrace that. One of the first is Barclays. Barclays Bank did a joint venture with us to open an accelerator based on fintech to create products that they can then have distribution for. So because they see the disruption that technology is going to make in their business.
Concretely, do we have any big conglomerates? Okay, Barclays is an example, but let's say a more GCC, Middle East, MENA company that is actively investing in the region, into startups.
All the telcos, because again, as you mentioned, the telcos are having commodity business, STC, Do, Etisalat, they're all investing aggressively. They're looking aggressively. Some of them are investing in startups and even in accelerators to get an early look at potential products to distribute through their channel.
And are they investing as a corporate or with the corporate VCs?
Mostly as corporate. Because
so directly. So for the people that don't know, like we can.
They've grown to be big enough where they think of themselves as governments. And like every time in the private sector we come up with a new idea, at least in Egypt, the government tries to replicate the idea, right? So the big companies kind of think of themselves as governments. So we can do everything better than anybody else. We can be a VC better than the VC. We can be an accelerator better than an accelerator. So they try and do everything themselves. After a while, some of them wake up and try and partner with people who specialize in that one subsector.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned government, right? And on our preparation of our interview, what you wrote to me, it sounds very interesting. And we were discussing about the topic of this interview and said, let's put some emphasis on government. They say, screaming like entrepreneurship. And that happens somebody's just not ready to be an entrepreneur sometimes. And that happens to also us in Asia. Every big government says entrepreneurship and putting money in entrepreneurship. And this is bringing people that are not made to be an entrepreneur, and it's nothing wrong with it. There are very successful executives around the world that never be an entrepreneur, yet they're very successful. It seems to me that entrepreneurship is taking up like a lifestyle. I want to be an entrepreneur because Elon Musk is an entrepreneur, because Richard Branson is an entrepreneur. Is this happening here?
It's kind of early. crappy lifestyle, don't do it for that. I think of entrepreneurs as kind of like soldiers, people we send out to have a miserable life, to protect us and help benefit us and the rest of us, right? And governments putting all this emphasis on entrepreneurship should be seen as an admission of failure of my generation and the generation before to fix the countries, and they've screwed it up so bad, and they're saying, hey, this is the way you guys should fix the country, right? They don't really look at it that way, and nobody really admits it. But that's the reality of the situation, is they screwed up the economy so bad that they need entrepreneurs to come in and break the mold and try and come up with new ideas to fix what our generation's messed up.
So, generation, what is it changing between the past and the future generation? What do you see?
The current generation, so how many of you, if you weren't doing what you're doing, would consider doing a social entrepreneurship project, something to solve a social problem? In my generation, there would have been one person that raised their hand sitting in the back of the room, probably, just by mistake.
Corner by the
No,
audience.
that's the amazing thing about this generation, okay? They all have this magnificent heart and this spirit and this tolerance around that connectivity has basically put into all of you. Nobody in my generation would have thought of solving a social problem. We would have figured out how to make money for ourselves and we're done, right? And that evolution that you've had is really what makes me optimistic about the future of the region, is people like the people who raised their hand here, this young generation, like my kids, who would all work and be very happy to spend their life to solve social problems and to do something to better the world.
I mean, I see the same trend in Europe, right? The so-called millennials, they have, and I'm part of it because I was born in 1984. But what I see about, at least in Europe, I can only speak about the millennials in the Middle East, is that millennials in Europe, they were born with everything. They never really had to fight for things. I mean, my father and my grandfather, they had to fight for things after the war, right? The Second World War. I just see millennials like very, very demanding and not very much on the delivery side. Do you believe it's happening here? I mean, we see a lot of people going on social aspect, which I find it extremely good. I'm definitely not one of those guys. But what's your opinion?
Say that probably a lot of the people who raised their hand were raised with the same, being well taken care of, not having struggled, having good family lives, and having seen much more misery around them than you would in Europe and the US, have become empathetic and felt a sense of social responsibility and love of country to really think of attacking those problems. And we're going way off money topic, but this is what motivates entrepreneurs to start companies, passion. A lot of you have passion to do social projects, and a lot of you have passion to do business projects. But it's all about the passion and how you bring that to what you're doing.
Okay. Going back to the accelerators, right? So you are probably one of the biggest in the region. My question is always the same. I see accelerator, we have 2 in Manila, 4 in Singapore, 2 of them are state-owned, 1 just went bankrupt, even in Singapore, right? Which Singapore generally thinks work if it's state-owned. Why aren't the guys making money?
We are.
Okay,
so
no, that's
the accelerators.
Few of them.
There are multiple types of accelerators. There are government accelerators, there are real estate accelerators, and there are for-profit accelerators. The real estate is somebody builds a compound and says, I'm going to have an accelerator to make my compound hip and sell more apartments. It's run for the wrong reasons. The government one is run with the wrong logic, in that, you're all in, and half of you are doing mediocre, half of you are doing okay, we'll keep giving you a little bit of money, drip, drip, drip. We run it with a cycle, and people come in and they go out. Again, so we don't have to make that decision and say, he's good, shoot him, he's good, keep her, shoot him. It's a terrible experience. You put everybody in the same thing and you run them all at the same cycle and have one system and try and optimize that system. So, as I mentioned, we screwed up a lot in the first cycle. My first incubator was in 1998 in Pasadena, trying to take ideas out of Caltech back when it cost $2 million to build a website. The first check was $2 million to start a company, right? Very expensive. So now we're in 3 countries and opening 3 more and hoping to have 12 locations by the end of 2018.
What kind of company you like to incubate?
So the kind of companies that Flat 6 likes to incubate are different than the companies I like, all right? The companies Flat 6 likes to incubate are the ones that have energetic leaders, energetic entrepreneurs with ideas that can be put together in 6 months. I like really geeky stuff that gets patented and takes a lot longer to develop and takes 3-5 years to mature and make money. So just a personal bias. An old Star Trek fan, I want like the next generation of stuff.
Okay, so speaking of which, what you as a VC, now as an accelerator, what are the skills you want to see in an entrepreneur?
I would say the previous panel, if most of you are here for the previous panel, summed it up pretty well. What I think, I like Keith's perspective in that he makes entrepreneurs do their business plan. So I won't give him too much away. He's talking about it now on a different stage, but makes entrepreneurs give their business plan. What does your company look like in 10 years? And give me the logic and work backwards. I usually take it forward and the same points. The presentation, you have to give me a presentation. It can't be just a sales pitch because the presentation shows how you think about it, right? The way you come at the problem and the way you come at explaining the problem and dissecting it and presenting it makes it, is a great reflection of you. Again, can you take the problem and slice it up into enough pieces that you can attack them one at a time, or that you can tell me how you're going to process them all simultaneously and convey that to me clearly? And I'd say that's probably the major part of the decision.
So like I said, I live in Asia and I see certain characteristics of Asian people that make them thrive, right? Like they're extremely schematic, they work really hard, they work really, really hard, right? As I mentioned before, in the Middle East, I see the Arabs extremely passionate and extremely good at selling. Okay, extremely passionate, extremely good at selling. Something I haven't seen in Central and Eastern Europe, where they have great programming skills, but okay social skills. So what do you think are the best qualities you can find here, and what is lacking the most?
What's lacking the most is de-emphasizing the social aspect of our lives, okay, and learning to work in teams. What we have is, as you said, we have great salespeople, great communicators, great social skills in conveying ideas, and great technical talent. We truly have great technical talent and great programmers, and people who live in a dysfunctional system learn how to make their way, okay? بالعربي فهلوة, right? Everybody in the Middle East knows how to make their way through a dysfunctional system and how to find a solution when you don't think an apparent one exists.
Okay. Talking of industries, what is hot in the Middle East? Fintech, retail, e-commerce, marketplaces.
I think fintech, we have a very low money penetration across the region. I think fintech has great opportunities right now. Anything that makes life easier for the consumer. Some of the things that have to integrate with the government, the smart cities and so on, and IoT, I think will be more difficult to bring online in the region because governments have to give you infrastructure and reliable communication, etc. I think Abu Dhabi and Dubai are doing very nice experiments and focus groups on what could be possible, but I think it's going to take a long time for that to roll out in other countries. What you really need is a mindset change among the leadership. And in our patriarchal society, the leadership is always people who are older than me, right? And it's really hard to communicate to these people that they have to change their thinking.
In terms of, you said fintech, right? Fintech, always the biggest problem is regulations, right? How are the, in the Middle East, how are the governments cooperating? Are they? In Asia, I can tell you some are, some of them like, no way, right?
Most governments perceive their control of society through guns and money, right? So letting go of one of those and letting it become a free market is very scary for governments. So I see a lot of resistance. I don't see a lot of flexibility. However, there are a few governments who are on the leading edge, and there are other governments that are going to look at it and maybe take a slightly different view that e-money enhances security more than I lose control on the financial markets.
Can you mention some governments? The most hedge and the more conservative, if you can.
Well, I mean, the most important, the UAE is ahead of everybody else. right, in thinking of how to liberalize the financial markets, and the DIFC and the Abu Dhabi global markets, the two regulators, they're on the cutting edge, right? Here, the central bank is just look at this. There's no need to comment. They're light years ahead. The central bank in Egypt today finally allowed the currency to float. We had an official rate of 888 yesterday, and the black market 2 days ago went to 17, right? So they finally allowed it to float. When I leave here, I'll figure out how much richer or poorer I am today than I was 30 minutes ago.
So if you could unify all the countries, all the GCC countries, that you could ask for one thing for them to do in order to bring the startup like San Francisco level or maybe London level, what would you ask them to do? One single thing. More money, more capital, less regulations, easier labor laws, one thing.
Open borders for trade and goods first. That one's easier. And then open borders for people. Okay, pick 3 countries and have open borders. Pick 5, pick 10. But as much as possible, open the borders and allow the flow of capital, ideas, and people across.
How are the American players doing in the Middle East? Are they doing, I mean, are they solving localized problems or? So for instance, I know that in Saudi Arabia, companies similar to Uber, etc., are solving a problem like women cannot drive. So women, they use a lot of e-commerce because they cannot go and drive to the stores and buy things. And there are companies that only tap into women so they can have shipped things delivered to their house. That's solving a localized problem. So how are the big guys in every sector, like fintech, e-commerce? I mean, we have the rocket obviously here with I never remember the name, Jumia, right? So
Western companies historically have looked at the Middle East as a place to take, not to give.
It's a very good point.
Okay?
Very good point.
Take people, talented people, take money, take resources, just to take. And that is slightly beginning to shift, where there's a sense of responsibility to give back, to do trainings, not just to train people to find the best 5 to send them to America, or not, but training to improve the ecosystem. And there is starting to begin to be a sense of social responsibility on the big corporates that are here. The new entrants now, they understand that the old model of come in, rape, pillage, and leave doesn't work anymore. You're not going to get away with that anymore. So they're coming in to engage and to see how they can fit in and add value to whatever societies and ecosystems they're going to participate in.
Are the big talents, Middle Eastern talents that they study in America and Europe coming back? Like Lebanese, for instance, 10 millions, if I'm not mistaken, 10 millions outside Lebanon, and the Lebanon is 4.
I'm sure you guys don't want all the Lebanese back, right? It'd be really crowded if they all came back. No, the people come and go in waves depending on policy, and it's really sad, right? 2004, the Egyptian government had great reforms. From 2004 to 2008, Egyptian professionals were coming back in the private sector, and people were coming back from the West to work in government, to add value to government. I think this program, the BDL program, is going to attract fantastic talent back to Lebanon, and it's actually going to attract fantastic talent to Lebanon from other places. I think you'll see Egyptian talent come here and Jordanian talent come here. So it's, unfortunately, policy dictates such a big part of that. And the governments really need to focus on what the 1 or 2 little things to make the perception. People, when somebody builds a mall or builds a compound, people go there because it's cool, because they have a perception it's cool. And Egypt succeeded for a while in persuading people outside of Egypt that being back in Egypt and working there under those current conditions was cool. Lebanon is perceived as cool right now. All right? 3 years ago, might not. You guys living here think it's dysfunctional because they don't know how to pick up the trash, whatever it is. Outside, people see it as cool, see it as happening, as hot, so people will come. And that's the most important thing, is to have a department, a minister of cool, somebody who's responsible for making the perception, the PR positive in the country, in every single country. You know what? Dubai and Abu Dhabi do it better than anybody else. Dubai, number 1, by far and away. And it's easier to register a company in Egypt than in Dubai? Nobody would have believed that, right?
For foreign ownership restriction, because they only have to be one specific.
No, in the free zone, right? It's easier. Forget the money. It's easier process to register a company in Egypt where everybody thinks it's dysfunctional than in Dubai where everybody thinks it's business friendly, right? It's just different presentations. One of them presents it very professionally. Here's how you do it. Here's the 17 steps it takes. And the other one, go find your way in the maze, right? So it's communication, it's presentation. Countries need to do proper presentation.
Before, I just want to ask you, who of you here studied abroad and came back in Lebanon? Or here's the answer. Huh? Very good, very good, very good. One last question before we have a brief Q&A session with you, Ahmed. A final message to entrepreneurs or potential entrepreneurs. They don't want to take it as a lifestyle, okay, business. What will be one piece of advice they will give them?
Don't want to take it as a lifestyle.
I would say, of course, we already mentioned they don't want, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur for lifestyle. They're only going to be one Elon Musk, okay? But one message, one tip of one advice you want to give to entrepreneurs that really want to be entrepreneur. Besides passion, we heard passion a lot of times.
It's going to suck and it's going to get better. All right? Just prepare yourself for that, okay? It's like you're going to run a marathon. You know you're going to hit a wall at some point and it's going to suck and your legs are going to ache and you're going to want to be a quitter. Don't.
Okay, so we're going to open up the floor. We have 9 minutes, okay? If you guys want to ask some question to Ahmed, please raise the hand. Very good. One round of applause. He's always the first. Good, good. 1 second. We're going to bring you a microphone. Thanks.
Hello. I'm really curious about social entrepreneurship in the region. I'm just curious what you see as the benefits of starting a social enterprise in the Middle East, the awareness that people have of social entrepreneurship, and the overall challenges of the ecosystem for those who want to start social ventures from Egypt, from Lebanon, from anywhere in the Middle East.
So you're talking about the one topic that gives me a split personality. All right? I really have a serious problem with this because instinctively, I don't believe in social entrepreneurship. I believe in social and entrepreneurship, two separate things, right? And I see nonprofits try and pretend they're for-profits and for-profits try and pretend they're nonprofits. Why don't you both just do what you're supposed to do, right? And do it really well. And let's not deceive ourselves. And then if you want to give money to a nonprofit, do it. On the flip side, I started one of the more successful social entrepreneurship companies by default against my will because of the regulatory framework in the government. So I started a for-profit company that has kind of a nonprofit mission to do online education. So I'm kind of conflicted, but ideally, I think nonprofit should be nonprofit, for-profit should be for-profit, because if you build a for-profit, and a for-profit solving a social problem is okay. Uber, Kareem, perfect example, right? It's a for-profit company run for profit, solving a social problem. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in that, right? There should be some economic benefit to somebody who solves a social problem. Feeding the poor and taking care of the homeless, that shouldn't be a for-profit business. That's something we all should give money to. That should be a non-profit business, okay? And that's hats off. And I think I want to keep my conscience and my greed separate, okay? So, but sorry, but that's, if you can sense it, I continuously have an inner struggle with this particular point.
No, I'm with you. I think I'm more interested in things that are maybe in fintech or in renewable energy where you're not necessarily saying for every basket I sell, I'm going to be giving 10% to charity or something like that. Something more of where you're trying to find a for-profit business solution to something that where your for-profit goals are kind of aligned with your social goals. Do you believe that exists or that works in the Middle East?
Your for-profit goals should be aligned with your social goals by law, right? If you pollute, you should put you in jail, right? If you have child labor, we should put you in jail. The law should take care of the social side of a for-profit business's social obligations. Of course, it has to be moral, and the board and the shareholders and the investors, right? And the gray area, I don't know. I don't want to opine on that. We'll leave judgment to others or to later. And the nonprofit, don't be ashamed of making money while doing something good. It's much better than making money doing something bad, right? So it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Get rid of that conflict. And you should take all the profit from that business, and if you want to give 10% back, take it as an investor and give it back and direct it properly into the most efficient nonprofit path you can find. ROE, you know, that's my main metric, ROE, return on effort, right? The return on the effort, because the effort you expend is what you will be judged on at some point, some of us believe, is the effort you were given, which is the energy, mental capacity, resources, and the return you got on them, not just how you spent them. But your job is to optimize benefiting other people with those assets.
Thank you.
Okay. One question over there. We probably have time for you, maybe one more. Okay. Can we have 2 questions? One from the gentleman over there, and then another one. Who can be the second one? The one to, okay. Assign. Okay. Question 1.
As entrepreneurship, how can we choose between bringing investor to our project and start big, or just rely on our limited resources and start small business, which will take a longer time to be big and making more money?
Very difficult question, too many variables, okay? But the variables you have to consider are, will you lose the race if you try and fund it yourself slowly, right? Probably the number one variable. Will I get my product to market on time? Will the guy next to me beat me to market? Will a bunch of people come in and fund? That's why Kareem gave away a large portion of their equity to get enough money before somebody else took the whole market and they could never capture it, right? So it's not a question you give a single answer to. It's different for each company, each business, and each entrepreneur, right? But you have to take all the variables into account. But I'd say that speed to market and the competition is probably the one that determines that the most.
Okay. Who was the second? You, right? Mike, do you mind? Sorry. Thanks.
Hello. So my question is, what's your best way to value a business, especially a startup? So how do you value a startup? How much does it cost, and what's the approach for this?
So 3 minutes tough job.
Yeah, no. Can I tell you? Part of it is like this. Okay, that's part of it. The other part of it is how much money do you need to get to where you're going? You don't want to overfill the tank, and you don't want to underfill the tank. And I don't want to put too much money in and demand to take too big a piece. So one of the things when we do the accelerator, realistically, if I was doing this on a pure economic model, I'd probably take 30% of the company. I think I'm entitled to 30% for the risk I'm taking. We only take 10 to 15 because the next round of funding, if we took 30, would put the entrepreneur under 50%. So we actually work it backwards that way to not put the entrepreneur under 50, because once he's under 50, he's demotivated at least in the second round.
But one more question. What's the 30% of a business that doesn't exist yet? You know what I mean? It's still in progress, so it's an entrepreneurship. They haven't sold anything yet. So
No, we incorporate, and the team decides to work on an idea, and we decide to put resources into that company to try and create value for us as a collective, okay? So it's a mini marriage. We decide to form a little family, and I'm gonna own 15%, you're gonna own 85, and we're gonna bring new investors, and this is what we're gonna do together in this little house, right? Pretty simple. So it doesn't exist. We form the company. Sometimes the company, in some countries, the company actually goes through the whole cycle of 6 months, and the 6 months is over, and they graduate and leave, and the paperwork still hasn't been approved from some of the governments, right? So it's pretty sad, but when you have given somebody money and you have an agreement and the paperwork's not done and the government hasn't finally funded the company, that's when you check. That's called the integrity check right there, okay? Because that person can walk away and say, we didn't really have that much of a deal.
Okay, guys, I'm sorry we don't have much more time left. Any final message?
I think the final message I would leave you is maybe a little bit bigger than you should have as entrepreneurs, is you're really you have the opportunity to build a generation and make the previous one irrelevant, okay? And technology technology is the one thing that is going to change in this generation. Because I invest in companies because they're going to be better next year. There's only two ways they can be better. Technology makes them more efficient, or more people are born and they get more people and more resources, they find more oil, whatever. Technology solves all the problems in society today. Some technological aspect, other than throwing brute force at it. So please focus on technology, focus on implementing efficiency, and make sure you have fun. You only get to walk through the deal one time, so enjoy what you're doing, all right? And always be proud of yourself, be proud of what you're doing, back to your point about social.
Ahmed, thank you very much. Thank you. Very good, man. Very good. Okay, don't go anywhere. Alpha is going to give us a presentation with Mr. Rami Hassoum.